Hi, everyone. I'm Cathay Carson, the Director of Enrollment at St. George's School of Montreal, and I'm really excited to be having a wonderful conversation with Jane Sibling, an alum, and Kim Ross, a current parent. We're looking forward to sharing a little insight about St. George's with you today. So to get us started, I'm going to ask our guests to introduce themselves and share a little bit about how they're connected to St. George's. Jane, would you like to start?
Yes, hi. Thank you, Cathay, for having me today. I love any occasion to talk about St. George's. My connection to the school is that I was a student at the school, I was a parent at the school, and an alum at the school. So wearing 3 different hats.
In fact, you're still a parent at the school.
Yes, yes.
And how about you, Kim?
Well, I'm a bit newer. My husband's job makes us move fairly frequently. And so I am just a current parent and actually a parent of a graduate who is doing her first year at university.
Well, thank you both for joining me today. So to get us started, I'm going to start with a question for Jane, our alum. What did you appreciate the most about the school during your time here? And how has your perspective on that changed now that you've had some distance from the school?
Thank you very much, Cathay. I think the quality that I appreciated most about the school was being part of an incredible community that ultimately felt more like a family than simply being surrounded by teachers and students. The opportunity of being a part of something bigger than ourselves is a value that I think is very meaningful, very St. George's, and that I appreciated very much. And now that I have distance from the school as an alumni perspective, I'm very grateful that some of my dearest friends, decades later, are still some of the people that I find inspire me and simply add value to my life today. A second aspect that I would say that I very much appreciate is having a good and inspiring education, the privilege to access a very good education in a very safe learning environment. There's a keen sense of ambitiousness at St. George's where you're encouraged to have grit, to take risks as a very curious learner. And I think St. George's really helps launch you on a path of preparedness, so to speak, where the quality of life and work-life balance is a philosophy that helps you take on relevant real-life experiences.
Thanks, Jane. Kim, you started off by sharing with us today that you've been a member of 7 schools. So why did you originally come to choose St. George's?
Well, my oldest child really was the impetus for us choosing St. George's. She wasn't thrilled about the school she was in. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation, and she wanted us to look and see what was out there. And so we explored a number of options. And the reason we chose St. George's on her side was really the excitement she had for some of the academic options that were offered. She loved the marine biology option that was coming up for her in another year. And she was really happy with the academic situation. She's very nature oriented. She loves animals and the outdoors, and she really wanted to embrace that part of it, but didn't really know where she wanted to go with it. She was a shy kid and really introverted, and not a kid that would ever speak in front of people or do anything. That she kind of faded into the background. She was that kid. And the reason why we chose it was because when we walked into the elementary school was our first stop with Louise, I believe, was with us that day. And there was just a feeling that you got when you walked into the building. It was like nothing that we've ever experienced in another school. It's not something that's really describable. Maybe it's a bit intangible, but there's sort of an overwhelming happiness that exists there. And I noticed really in my first moments that the children were, felt very capable. They were elementary students. They felt very capable going up to the desk and asking questions, and everyone knew their name and who they were. And this environment was really the key for us, was a school that would actually take the time to get to know her and see where her value was, and help her develop that.
Thank you. Jane, to the best of your knowledge, what most differentiates St. George's for you?
I would say it's a combination of being a forgiving and an ambitious environment. So you're motivated to achieve your goals with a make it kind of attitude happen to excel, but somehow you're deeply fortified by a cushion of forgiveness, that flaws are inherent in all of us. And I think this belief frees you to really learn and grow and connect and experience St. George's life to the fullest. I'm also trying to think about, I think it actually does propel you to be set on a path for lifelong learning, because it makes you feel in the future it's always going to be safe to take chances and risks, because you have that foundation that it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to fall down. You'll get back up, you'll try in another direction, you'll detour in another direction, but always the ambitious feeling to learn, to achieve more, to be curious is something that you're intrinsically motivated to steer yourself towards.
And as you know, a member of the team that has worked here for 25 years, I would echo that what you've described is also the feeling that we've created in this culture for the faculty and the staff. So it feels like this community of lifelong learners. Kim, what would you say is the biggest impact the school has had on your children?
Well, I have two very different kids, and the impact has been very different on each of them, but at the same time, there are commonalities. My older child is very academic driven. She's type A personality, didn't know what she was going to do with her life, really very introverted, and she was able to find her voice. She was able to find what she was going to be, and it didn't change her. It just allowed her to become who she was meant to be. And that's the big takeaway, is that it's allowed both of them in very different ways to become who they're meant to be. My younger one is more of a dramatic arts and creative kid, and she has taken it in an entirely different direction. But the overwhelming thing that they've gotten from it, besides the community, because that is not to be discounted in any way. I mean, this has become a family to us in a place that is not home. And that's a really special part of what St. George's is. But the ability to be empowered to make change and to be heard, and all of the things that mutual respect between the teachers and students that allows them to grow is something that is rare, and it's not found everywhere. And that's the big takeaway for us, I think.
Thanks. I kind of missed part of question one earlier. I think I'll ask it to you now. It kind of, I think it fits nicely to where we are. In what ways is the school what you expected? And in what ways is it different than what you had expected when you first joined?
Well, I think I expected the warmth because I had already seen it. I expected the way the teachers engaged with the students because I'd already experienced a bit of that. We were allowed to do a day at school, and the kids saw that for themselves before we chose. But what exceeded my expectations and what was different from what I expected, I mean, I never dreamed that my daughter would come to be so able to express herself in the way that she has. I never dreamed that we would do things like the World Scholars Cup and a trip to Barcelona and Yale and amazing experiences worldwide. And one of the dreams we had as parents was to raise really good global citizens. And those are things that I didn't expect because I'd never found them before. And to have gotten all of that and more, there's not enough words. I mean, the St. George's for me is the gold standard, and remains that, and will always be that. And my kids will always call this home, even though this isn't home as a place.
Thank you for sharing. This is kind of a fun question. If the school were to be represented as a single person, what would its personality be in 3 words? Jane?
And should we get into why, or just
Sure.
kind of?
And of course, absolutely. The why is probably the most important part.
I choose St. George's answer the question. I would say this is a great question, because it really is a real thriving soul, St. George's, in many ways. So I think the first word that comes to mind is authenticity. It's a willingness to be open, honest, very true, without necessarily any pretension or insincerity. So there's this desire there to find your voice, develop your voice, stay true to your voice. And I would say that's number 1. Number 2, I would think the personality trait of staying flexible is really relevant here. You're able to adapt and pivot, as we see coming out of these special times that we're all still dancing through right now. You're able to remain very hopeful and confident and well prepared for anything life throws at you in this culture. The next quality I would say is this culture of kindness, so to speak. More specifically, this positive attribute of being considerate, helpful, respectful, and benevolent, really, to others. And then piggybacking on what Kim said, being very mindful global citizens, because the circles extend beyond the school in a very genuine, authentic way. And if I could just say a last personality trait that I like is maybe being driven while cultivating a sense of humility at the same time. And I find that duality fascinating about St. George's, because it's the desire to do things to the best of your ability, to be extremely proactive while maintaining this growth mindset, to want to learn more and question more, and to place you on a new journey where you do want to make a positive impact in the world.
I love that person. What about you, Kim? How would you answer the same question?
I just want to piggyback off of Jane for a sec before I answer it. I just want to say what you said when you were talking about that duality is so important, because it is an environment and a place, but it's also, it does have a soul. There is that piece of intangible quality that you don't find in other places. And, being teachers and administrators, as you guys are, I mean, I was really struck last year, or actually the year before last, when my daughter did her project, her big project in grade 11. And it was Mr. O'Connor who said, Courtney, I want to talk to you about this more afterwards. And they had a Zoom call afterwards where he was asking her to explain and give him more so that he could take that to his leadership class that he was doing at the time. And it's not just teachers teaching students, it's also students teaching teachers. They work together. It's a very symbiotic relationship in that way. Anyways, my values, though, are dynamic, empowering, and warm. And the reason why I chose them is the dynamic environment for education. It's evolving all the time. There are so many elements of learning outside the classroom, of being part of things that are bigger than themselves, and being able to be leaders and to learn to be leaders in those areas. And the two things that really impacted my older daughter was the marine biology trip to Roatan and the trip she took with the head of school to a STEM conference in Victoria. And she took so much from those moments, those pieces of the education that were outside of the classroom, that she ended up choosing a career or a path in sustainability. And she's going to be attending one of the top programs for that starting this fall in university. She didn't know she wanted to do that. She didn't know that that was the piece that was going to click for her. But there was so much offerings outside the classroom that she became involved in, and not just on an academic level, but also extracurriculars. Glee gave her confidence and showed her she can do something that she didn't believe that she could do. There's so many pieces to the dynamic type of education that they're offering at St. George's. It's just not something that's easily explainable, but the pieces are all there. I mean, even during this terrible time that we've been through with COVID, the quick pivot to a synchronous classroom, watching that happen from home and seeing the kids and how engaged they were, and how it didn't change their spirit. It could have, but it didn't. That's the dynamic nature of the way the school operates. And empowering was my second word. And I see that every day with my younger daughter, because kind of horrified me the first week of school when she said, "I'm going to take a meeting with Mr. O because I want to talk about something." I'm like, "What? You're going to take a meeting?" She was in 7th grade when she said she was going to take this meeting, and she took the meeting, and Mr. O treated her like she was an adult in the room. And they get so much from that. So much trust is placed in the kids to be empowered to change things in the school. If they feel like there's something they want that isn't there, they can make things happen. And I think it gets them excited about going into the building every day, and what might happen and what they could do to leave it better than they found it, in some ways. And the warm piece is really important to us because, we are away from our family. We live in a city where we really have no one. And St. George's has embraced my children like, a grandma's hug. I mean, it's given them family, and in a place where they have no family. And that's something that cannot be, is not replicated anywhere else.
Something I actually wanted to add in, if you don't mind, even though my person is
Yeah.
done and left the room, the coffee shop, is that St. George's also has teachers and staff and heads of schools that are leaders in promoting your own individual blueprint. And I was thinking to myself, a very interesting analogy is for my own son that also is starting college. He's going to University of Pennsylvania in the fall, was directed by multiple consultants to do XYZ curriculum a certain boxed way. And I remember Natalie Bose sitting with him for hours to really say to him, I want you to be authentic. I don't care what marks you're getting in X, Y, and Z that meets the bill checklist, do. What do you love? Because the more you're true and love what you do, the more you'll really shine in that natural way. And that advice was not only different from every other school out there and every other consultant out there, but it actually, I believe, is the reason why he got accepted to the school, because he stayed true to what made him himself. And then taking to my daughter, who started grade 7 this year, I believe the same thing happened in a unique way. While school was integrating new students in the school and people were talking about how difficult it was and how negative it was, my daughter, in a mask, in a bubble, often on a computer, thought it was the most positive experience, who fell in love with Glee and dancing, and somehow connected with a teacher, I'm not there, connected with different motivating advisors, different impressionable teachers who found her based on who she is. Very different than my son. So I echo what you say, and that's a talent of a school like St. George's. It keeps going no matter what, in a true, genuine way, no matter what.
Yes, and individual education is, something that is very precious. I mean, they really take the kids and meet them where they're at. not where they want them to be or where they're expected to fit into some mold that is preordained. They really meet them exactly where they are and show them how to get to where they want to go.
Yeah.
Thank you both for sharing. All right, moving right along. Let's see, where should we go here? How about, all right, what one thing would you change about the school for the better if you had to choose something? This is for Jane.
Well, I am a huge fan. So this was a very hard question, probably my hardest one, because I think you guys are genuinely, I know this sounds silly, but you are doing everything quite right. But the only thing would just be probably a global thing across schools, which is maybe to start the day a little later. I think teens are going to bed later. I think that progressive schools should evolve a little bit, that it's okay to start the day a little bit later. And to allow that learning to be kind of matched with their natural circadian rhythm, so to speak. That would be one point. The other thing would be maybe a little bit of content. I would not dismiss mathematics, history, English, science, but maybe to enhance more financial literacy or socio-emotional intelligence courses, and to shift the curriculum to make it a little bit more practical life application skills for a better preparedness for life, because we're seeing now that life is so all over the place that the more you're equipped with your toolkit, the better you are.
And I would add that those definitely definitely are in there in subtle ways. But I like the direction that you're thinking. St. George's always had them in those subtle ways through Core 5 and through the project-based learning. But I think it is an interesting shift we're going to see, certainly in progressive schools, but I think we're going to start to see some of those trends. So I think you're onto something, Jane.
And I was going to just add one last thing. Again, I think St. George's is an incredibly optimistic environment, but rather than look at digital technology, as you see so many parenting classes as a negative, what's digital literacy? What's mindful literacy of digital education? Because this is where these kids are at. Right? So let's embrace it. Let's teach them effective ways, responsible ways to be respectful, benevolent citizens, even on digital media. So that would be another area that I would make a bit of a shift in a more formalized way.
And Kim, how would you describe the values of the school and the values of the families within our school community?
Well, I think they're similar. I mean, obviously we choose our schools because they mirror our values, right? The biggest thing that for me was community, because we need that community as a family. Our family looked for community, and St. George's has delivered that in spades. The mutual respect that the teachers and the students have for one another, that is a value that comes from home, but also when you're being shown that every day in every interaction you have in school, it teaches you to be more benevolent. It teaches you to be empathetic and kind. And, we lead by example, and this school definitely does that. And the integrity piece is really critical for us. So, teaching them to be good citizens, teaching them to be valued members in their community is important, and it's easy there. It's easy at St. George's to do that in many ways. The other piece that I think that they do very well, and that is important in families as well, is inclusivity and accepting everyone, and everyone is welcome. And that's something that St. George's does also very well. And the last thing I had was health first. Health first being really something that has been embraced at St. George's for years, but has become incredibly critical in this past year. health first. They take care of each other and they take care of themselves. And if you're not feeling well, you stay home, and it's okay. You catch up. It's okay if you miss. They are very responsive to the change that needs to happen. But really, I was so struck by how the kids kept it all together this year with COVID, and how even though we couldn't do things in person, there were still so many opportunities to be a community and to, interact in those ways. We did a Zoomsicle instead of a musical. We still had Glee every Friday, even if it was on Zoom, even if it wasn't perfect, it was there. And those were things that the kids needed to keep their spirits up during this time. So all of those values have really become very evident in this past year, especially with, Zoom classes and the COVID situation and pivoting on a sometimes weekly basis to be where we needed to be for that. And they did an amazing job doing all of that. So, and still making people feel welcome and warm and invited. So those were my values.
Thank you. And Jane, I actually really love this question. What do you think families would find the most surprising about St. George's?
I actually love this question too. The way you posed it, it makes me think about something very honestly that frustrates me about the perception of St. George's and the reality as a student, a parent, and alumni when you leave, which is moments of pause, moments of reflection at St. George's are opportunities where you're almost building up fuel in your tank to embrace the rigorous curriculum, as opposed to the moments of pause and reflection being missed opportunities or being viewed as a curriculum that is perhaps not as robust as it is. So I actually think St. George's is brilliant. They get it right. They understand, just like human beings and all of us, we need to breathe, we need to reflect, we need to take a minute in order to really take in, absorb, grow, and thrive all the rigorous learning opportunities that are presented to all the children in whatever facet fascinates them. That surprised me the most.
And as we were going, I started thinking about, families who are going to be watching, hopefully watching our roundtable conversation are really families who are starting the journey of finding that right school for their child, that right school for their family. As parents who've done this a few times and who definitely are, coming to the end of the, let's call it the high school journey, what advice or feedback would you give to families who are watching this video, who are thinking, okay, now how do I start this? How do I find that right school beyond this conversation? Kim, you want to go first? We'll change it up.
Okay. I think finding the right school means visiting. I think it means that you have to see them. You have to, in whatever way it's possible to see them at this time. But, I think you have to have the conversations that aren't the easy conversations, that aren't, oh, what do you offer for academics or what do you offer for sports? But, what is your philosophy in the way you're going to interact with my child? How is that going to, ask the tough questions. How is it going to improve my child's well-being? What parts of this do you want me to know in those areas? And I think if you ask the harder questions, I wish I had in a lot of other instances asked harder questions. I mean, we kind of stumbled into this and have found this amazing environment, and because my daughter was adamant that she needed a change and it wasn't a good place for her where she was. But I wish I would have asked those questions that you're hesitant to ask almost when you're touring schools? I wish I would have asked more of those questions instead of the, oh, what do you offer for academics and what do you offer for extracurriculars? I mean, those are important, but it's more about how people interact with each other. And when you visit, you really see it because they take note of your name. You know, I mean, teachers, oh, Courtney, you know, you're coming here next year. Courtney, I got that. And then they knew her name on day one. And that was what was so impressive for me. So I do think you have to ask harder questions when you're looking.
And by harder questions, you mean questions about how the child would feel on the day-to-day basis? Is that what you're?
Yes. Harder questions. The more the deeper questions, not the surface ones. You know, what do you want? What are your values, and what do you want the school's values to be? Those are really important things. And I don't think I've ever asked that question. What is the school's values? You know, I don't think I've ever asked those things in 7 schools. And, you know, we were lucky enough to land with you guys and have all of this. Now I would ask those questions. Now I would want to know those things.
This is exactly what we need to be doing, sharing with families, you know, helping guide them to how they land in the best school. And as a director of enrollment, that's always how I see my role, helping families who start this process learn about St. George's, but at the same time, you know, learn about what's important to them, and are they going to find it in the school? Because that's how, in my opinion, how they're going to find the right fit for their family. Jane, what advice would you give? You've got a whole slew of, you know, all the way to university experience finding the right school. What would you share with prospective families?
I just had this conversation on the lake this summer where I said, someone was asking about schools, people in elementary school, and they were asking me questions. They know how much I love St. George's, but they were asking overall, how did you select the school? I said, please don't make yourself go to that 7 to 9 p.m. curriculum night or that tour and bank all your decisions on that one moment in time. Think to yourself long and hard what a good fit is for your child, and have conversations with people in any context out of school to really understand where you're at and what the strengths of a school are, so you can make a good decision. Because if you put too much pressure on yourself, dancing around as I did the first round of all the different schools and open houses, it's overwhelming, it's confusing, and it's distracting. And you'll know in your little voice what feels right. If you go to a person you trust who went to the school or has a child in the school who has a positive story in a genuine way, or a teacher, or you. I mean, I'm not just saying this because you're there. Cathay really is, for anybody listening, the best admissions enrollment officer in the city. I have to say that because I believe it, and that's what I believe. She will take the time to see what your area of interests are and how to make that fit work or not work, and be honest with you. So I would say, don't put so much pressure on that one night or that one morning or that one tour, and then write it off. Keep an open mind and be broader with your understanding.
I think we've provided lots of interesting nuggets and information about St. George's. I think we're coming to a close in our conversation. I love talking with both of you. It really is just a genuine pleasure to talk about a school we all love. And have the opportunity to share with anyone that's watching us today. And I look forward to having the opportunity to meet with anyone who's interested in hearing more about St. George's, whether it's a phone conversation right now, or hopefully will be a visit soon in person. But please, if you are interested, just reach out, and it'll be our pleasure to continue the conversation about St. George's.